everyone. Welcome back to Keto and Crime. Today I'm back with you covering what happened yesterday, Wednesday, April 24th, in the Chad Daybell trial. I'm going to get into it really quickly. I am Tracy. I run this channel. I do true crime, dark history, some horror movie reviews, and cases that I have done in-depth deep dives. I also cover their trial if it's possible, if there's an audio or a live stream of it. So I've done Kyle Rittenhouse, I've done Lori Vallow, and now I'm doing Chad Daybell. I have so many playlists on this case. You can see them on my channel. And again, if you're new here, welcome. Hope I earned your subscription. If you're returning, thank you. You're what keeps this channel afloat. And with that being said, got the 𝗠𝗂𝗀𝗃 𝗪 tree going on. It changes holiday to holiday. And with that, we're going to dive into what happened yesterday, a Wednesday, April 25th. If you were watching this right after it drops, you're watching this on Thursday, April 25th. Let's dive in. All right. Once court begins, the state will call Brenda Dye, who is the Fremont County coroner. She is being questioned by Assistant District Attorney 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁. She has been coroner of Fremont County, Idaho since January of 2019, and they began to talk about what kind of training and what her qualifications are. She specifically says that she responds to unintended deaths. She determines the cause of death and signs off on the death certificate. She said they look for weapons, medications, health history. Basically, unattended death, as she defines it, is deaths that happen outside of a doctor's care. So if you die in the hospital of a terminal illness, they kind of know what caused that. If you're hit by a car, they kind of know what that is. But anything outside of an accident or dying under a doctor's care, hospice in the hospital, is what is considered an unattended death. Even if you have a heart attack and die at home, that would still be ruled an unattended death because you may not have been weren't necessarily under a doctor's care. So that is what she does. She says they look for medications, health history, and weapons. She says they normally go back 6 months to a year on medical history. And she says they normally try to have a cause of death determined within 8 hours, which is when rigor mortis has set in to the point that the body almost becomes something different. It's not normal, in other words. Then 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗁 asked her if she knew any of the Daybell. She said no. And then she said she received a call on that October morning to talk about Tammy Daybell. Said that Dye actually called her deputy coroner to come as well. She said it took her about 45 minutes to get to Chad Daybell's home after she received the call early that morning. She said that Chad Daybell, the deceased husband, was distraught and crying. She said she observed him being very upset. She said Garth, his son, was pretty much just there. He was very emotionless, kind of stone-faced. And then they talk about her time of death and the date of her death being October 19th, 2019. She said she looked at the body, observed a few things, and then questioned Chad about his wife's health history. Then there's a picture of Tammy's body that is handed to Dye and is moved in as an exhibit, shown to the jury. She talked about what she first observed after looking at the body, the blood coming from her mouth, the pink foam substance. She said she was wrapped in a blanket and she was kind of hanging still sort of off the bed, even though Chad and Garth said they had moved her from her half off, half on position between the floor and the bed back to almost fully on the bed. She said that she saw both rigor mortis starting to set in as well as lividity, which means she could still move the body a little bit. She was colder than the room temperature, and it looked as though there was no signs of a struggle and that she had died laying on her back. Chad told Dye that he felt her body roll off the bed. That's what woke him up. he asked how, Di said she asked Chad how it was possible because she was really cold. He thinks it was because she pulled on the sheets when she fell. He told her that Tammy was going through menopause. As a woman going through menopause, yes, menopause causes a variety of things that I wasn't even aware was a thing to happen to your body. But to actually throw menopause in there as a sudden death just shows me how clueless Chad Daybell's is. Anyway, and then he told her that she liked to sleep with her feet out from under the blanket. To each their own. I personally like to be all warm and toasty. He told her that Tammy had been feeling not quite herself. She said she felt outside her body, like she was halfway between the veil and this world. All week, she said she had been having some fainting spells, and she said that he suspects she's had low blood pressure, even though she didn't go to the doctor. She didn't like to go to the doctor. And then he pointed out her natural remedy book on the side table. Yeah, he wanted everybody to know she didn't got to go to the doctor, but she had just been for a hurt arm. So why wouldn't she just happen to mention, hey, I fainted? It doesn't seem, real probable. He said that about half past midnight, she had a coughing fit and that she had also vomited one time. She said that she made the initial amendments to what would be on Tammy's death certificate, which was natural causes or unknown. And then recently, with everything going on, that was amended to be homicide. The autopsy was not done initially, as Chad Daybell did not want it done. It was done after she was exhumed several months later. Then they're talking about that autopsy that happened after she was exhumed. She's saying that they were, how they dissected the body, that sort of thing. She said if she threw up, there wouldn't necessarily be food in her stomach. And she said that the only organ that came up as not normal after that state of decay was her lungs. She said there was a lot of foam in her lungs. So the lungs were not normal, not healthy. Di then talked about all the records that she was giving on the initial. She did an initial exam, but not a full autopsy. And then later on, she also assisted with after exhumation. She said that when the Arizona police contacted her a couple of months later, they wanted all her records. And that's when she first heard the name 𝗚𝗏𝗚 in addition to Chad Daybell. 𝗟𝗏𝗀 asked Di if she had any regrets. She said she regrets her original decision. She said, had I known more information, I would have ordered an autopsy, not just a cursory exam. But she said with the limited training that coroners sometimes get, she made the best determination she can. What she means by that, coroners in a lot of places are elected officials. Lots of times you'll see a mortician or a funeral director elected to be a to be a coroner, or just somebody. It doesn't even have to be like a mortician science type of person. There are states that require them to actually be like a medical doctor, either a radiologist or a pathologist, to be a coroner, because they know what to look for that somebody else. But lots of states have no requirements at all, or only being a mortician or a funeral director that deals with a lot of mortuary science is all that's required. So I assume Idaho is one of those where you don't necessarily have to be qualified and beyond being able to hold a scalpel and be trained on how to make a Y incision. So 𝗟𝗏𝗀 then says no further questions, and John Pryor is now cross-examining. He starts asking about the bruises that were seen on Tammy's initial examination and how old they were. She said they were older, but they, were still fresh enough to have color in them. He asked, was Chad the only one that did not want a full autopsy? And she said, no, Emma had a real problem with a full autopsy because she didn't want her mother treated that way. So I'm becoming more and more sus about Emma Daybell. the more I hear about her. I at first thought she was just kind of an innocent bystander standing by her dad, but she's coming off as very sinister. I'm not saying that she had anything to do with it, but I think maybe she had an inkling and was covering for her dad. That's how I feel about her and Garth at this point. I'm beginning to think they were a little more sinister than they've been accused of. What do you think? Let me know down below. So then Brenda Dye is given the police report that was done initially on the first investigation of Tammy, and she's reading through it. Then there's a quick sidebar with the attorneys, and then a 30-minute break while the judge discusses some stuff with the attorneys. Then we're back with Pryor's cross-examination, and then he asked her to go through everything that she did at the scene that day. He put a body chart up on the projector screen and basically talking about, had her go through that chart and kind of compare it to Tammy Daybell's body. They talked a little bit more about the blood-tinged foam and the old bruising, and how there was no new bruising. They were really trying to hone in that she had no fresh bruises on her body, that is, from being choked, since we now know that she died of asphyxiation. And then he starts talking about all the different coloring on Tammy, comparing the body chart with a picture of Tammy Daybell's body. And then he asked, did Garth talk about how he brought her, Tammy, a quarter pounder and French fries? And Di said, no, he did not identify what was in her stomach. He only said that she vomited, and as a result, there was nothing in her stomach. And then Pryor starts listing off all the medications that were found to be in the Daybell house, and started confirming them one by one with Di. She said that Pryor said, you were told that Tammy would have minor fits consistent with seizures, correct? Di said yes. And then she says that how Emma talked about how her Tammy was taking clogging classes but couldn't keep up, and that she was growing weaker and weaker. And Di says, yes, Emma did tell me that. And then he said, you did make a determination that there was a medical reason as to how she passed away, but it all changed. And Di says, yes, at first I put it was natural causes, undetermined medical cause, but then after further information, it was changed to homicide. And then Pryor starts ranting about how the FBI was involved in the exhumation of Tammy's body, and that the whole reason for that was to look for something suspicious. And Di says, yes, that's normally why something is exhumed. And then her autopsy was done in Utah, since she was shipped to Utah for burial. And then Di got access to the reports later on. And then basically she is released by Pryor, and 𝗟𝗂𝗀 comes back on to redirect. She asked Di to recall anything in the medical history that may have stood out to her. She said that there was nothing suspicious. All the medicines there were something any healthy person might have had for occasional bouts of illness. Di said she mostly talked to Chad and Emma on the scene. She did not talk much to Garth. He would mainly nod or shake his head in response. She said she amended Tammy's death certificate later due to the results of the exhumation autopsy, and then learning about the buried dead children, JJ and Tylee. And then 𝗟𝗂𝗀 asked her more about the day that Tammy was found dead, and she went through everything again. And then Pryor wants to further redirect, but Boyce will not allow it. He says that you have been going back and forth through the same stories. I think we all understand. And Di is released from the stand and from the subpoena. The next witness called by the state is 𝗙𝗪𝗓 Harris. She is a friend of and former co-workers of Tammy Daybell. She was she taught the clogging class that Tammy was taking, and also worked in for the same city that Tammy did as a librarian. She said, we were friends. We would have conversations more than a hello. So this is someone that Tammy actually talked to. Harris said that Daybell came to her classes, that Tammy came to her classes in early August and September of 2019. Every week was a 1-hour class once a week. She said Harris said she did not recall any issues with Tammy not being able to keep up, getting tired, or falling behind during any of the clogging classes that she attended. And she attended at least 8 or 9. And she said she never saw any issues with her getting behind or failing. She said that Tammy was pretty serious about her physical fitness, i.e. we have her Fitbit data show that she was training for either a 5K or a 10K. And her cardiovascular system was probably above average for a woman her age. Then they asked about her further training. She said that she attended a high fitness class at St. Anthony's there in Sugar City. And she said that she stood by Tammy in the class. They both took it. It's a high intensity class with burpees and explosive movements. So Tammy was taking more than clogging and doing her daily running and walking. She was also taking a high intensity cardio class. And that was held 2 times a week for an hour at a time. And she said that Tammy had no problems keeping up in those classes either. Now, I don't know if you've ever done a burpee. My ass can't do one. I have to stop and climb back up. If you're doing a 1-hour class that consists of high explosive movements twice a week, in addition to a 1-hour clogging class, in addition to running and walking, if anything was wrong with Tammy, she's just tired. And she had an evil husband. But she said that Harris said that she talked to Tammy regularly in these classes as well as daily, and there was no problem. She did not seem tired, sick, or in other words, traumatized. And now 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗃 rests and Pryor now cross-examines. He confirmed the number of exercise classes, clogging classes that she attended before she died. She said at least 5, but probably closer to 8 or 9. Harris said he asked her to characterize Tammy's fitness, and Harris says she was definitely a very fit woman. She wasn't overweight, and she was able to keep up in a lot of exercise for her week. Harris said she saw Emma Daybell in one of those high-intensity classes they all took together, and that Emma was also in the clogging class. So he's just trying to establish that maybe Emma saw something that she didn't. He rests, and 𝗥𝗲𝗹 now comes back on to redirect. He is talking about, again, having her specify that Tammy had no issues in either the clogging class or the HIT class and had never expressed any feelings of being sick. And Harris is released. Next is another friend of Tammy Daybell's, Shanna Miller. She's a school teacher at Central Elementary in Sugar City, Idaho for over 30 years. She worked with Tammy Daybell as a government employee. She was also on the committee that interviewed Tammy for a position at the school, and she also attended that high-intensity class with Tammy and Miss Harris. So these are all friends and co-workers of Tammy. Then she talked about how both Tammy and her daughter attended the high-intensity class. She said that at first, Tammy and her daughter could not complete the workouts correctly, but over time, they built up to it, which is pretty normal and standard. She said she saw Tammy almost every day at work, in addition to seeing her 3 times a week or 2 times a week for that class. And she would say by the time she started the fitness class, she had lost a little weight. She had improved. She seemed to be in great health. She was happy, bubbly, and seemed very healthy and definitely above average physical fitness. He asked her, she is asked when Tammy Daybell started working at Sugar City Central School, and she said in 2018. And she said that Miller and Daybell were attending those classes for at least 18 months. So twice a week, every week for 18 months. That's easily 50 or 60 classes. And she said that Tammy had no issue having the stamina to complete those workouts, and basically then Miller is then briefly cross-examined by Pryor and then is released from the stand and from subpoena. The next the next state witness called by Rocky Wixom is Jennifer Gessler. She also works at Central Elementary School. She's a first grade teacher. She's been there for 26 years. She worked with Tammy Daybell in 2019 and says Tammy was a librarian and she would see Tammy every day. They were good friends. She was always bubbly and happy. She was a person you wanted to be around. And she was the one that invited Tammy and Emma to that fitness class, the HIIT class. She said that I personally was in the front row. I'd been going to the class a long time. Tammy and Emma started in the back row. They were always giggling and adding their own moves, so having a good time. She said Tammy really enjoyed the class and said that Tammy, just like everybody else, had a little bit of trouble building up, but then was able to complete the entire class with no problem, and she does not recall Tammy ever taking any breaks or having to sit down because she felt faint or couldn't breathe. She said the Friday before Tammy died, she ate lunch with Tammy. She was healthy, happy, talkative. She was sitting by her son Seth, who had come in to visit her. It's a normal day, and then she was super surprised to see that Tammy had passed away because she had always considered her glowing and healthy. Wixom rests. Pryor begins to cross-examine. She asked if he basically said, if you and Tammy were such good friends, why do you never go to Tammy's house? And mic drop. That's all he asks. If you and Tammy were such good friends, why did you never go to Tammy's house? I was never invited, but you can be good friends with people at work, Pryor. I think you're grasping at straws here. But then Pryor just rests, and then Wixom comes back on to redirect and wanted to again clarify between a high fit class and a Zumba class. She said that what they did was high intensity interval exercise. Zumba is a little more like a traditional aerobics dance class. He also talked about some of her conversations with Tammy, what they talked about. She said normal stuff. And then she said that she once made a comment to Tammy during lunch saying she wished she ate as healthy as her. Because evidently Tammy ate meat, vegetables, salad, normal fruit, normal things that you would eat when you're in training. And that then Pryor redirects again and asks for clarification. He said that Tammy and her daughter did the high fit class, not a Zumba class. And Gessler says, yes, it was a high intensity interval training class, not a Zumba class. Pryor had been trying to say it was just a simple aerobics class, and now we know it's a lot more than that. And then they break for lunch. The new witness called by the state is Detective Bruce Mattingly of Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Lindsay Blake is questioning Mattingly and his background. She asked him about his background as a detective, and then he was the one that responded to Tammy Daybell's unintended call death on October 19th, 2019. He learned that Tammy was the name of the person that is deceased. He worked along with Deputy Greenhall, who testified the day before, and that he also said that law enforcement is not the one that determines to have an autopsy. The coroner makes that decision. He said there was not an investigation of homicide or anything sinister about Tammy's death until everything started coming out with JJ and 𝗙𝗍 and later in 2019. He said that he learned about the involvement of JJ and 𝗙𝗍 as well as the stuff in Arizona about the same time everybody else did when they were called in to look for both the children and Charles's Jeep. Blake then asked about Tammy Daybell's medical records. She said if there was any indication from his viewpoint of studying those records, if there were health issues. Mattingly said there was general health issues. She had been described some medication for her wrist pain and was managing her depression, but nothing that would indicate she had a terminal illness or was slowly dying. He said that Tammy was reported to by Chad to faint and slow down and being dizzy. He said there was never any indication of that from anyone else that he talked to or any of her medical records. And then he talks more about the day she died. He said 𝗚𝗂 told everybody that would listen. Again, one reason I think 𝗚𝗂's kind of sketchy, that her mom had been slowing down, but that 𝗚𝗂 was unwilling to do a full-on interview with Mattingly when he attempted to talk to her. He then said that Tammy had 2 life insurance policies, and they put the policies up as an exhibit. And there is a short sidebar between the judges and the attorneys, and then they are allowed to admit the 2 life insurance policies. And then there's a little bit of projector issue, so they have to fix that. And then it kind of shows some forms related to the life insurance policy. It shows Chad filling out some sort of form on Tammy Daybell's policy that was filed the day before Tammy died, and Chad said her health had started to change. So he actually filled out a form saying she was in declining health. They talk about finding the Fitbit and that they requested a search warrant at that time to look at the Fitbit data. Now, I have a Fitbit. I've been wearing one for about 4 years now. It tracks everything from your resting heart rate. I wish Tammy had worn her Fitbit to bed, because it would track her resting heart rate, her breathing rate. It would have shown a lot more, but she tended to take it off and charge it at night, so it didn't have any of that information. But it will track everything throughout the day as well as movements. But she didn't wear it regularly at night, so they only had partial data. But he talks about how much that will track. And then they take another little break as they were still having some problems with the projector. And then we come back to the testimony, and then they are still talking about Fitbit and the Fitbit data. Again, he commented that the sleep data was very sparse, but he said that everything that they could see regarding the time that she did wear it was normal, that she was regularly over 10,000 steps a day, maybe more, a lot more intense exercise. Her heart rate, was in the cardio zone and then would quickly fall back down after exercise. Then Blake hands Mattingly another exhibit. He looks through the pages, and they appear to be the more of the life insurance policy with $300,000 on a Prime America policy and $130,000 on a Life Map policy. Mattingly said that he learned that both had been paid out to Chad Daybell shortly after Tammy's death. Blake rests, and Pryor now takes over cross-examining. He asked Mattingly how many times he mentioned talking about 𝗚𝗂 Daybell and how Mattingly tried to talk to her. He gave him dates and times that he tried to reach out to 𝗚𝗂. He said that when I say 𝗚𝗂 Daybell, I mean Emma Murray. I'm just referring to her as being Chad and Tammy's daughter. He then talked about how both 𝗚𝗂 and her husband had refused to talk. And then Pryor starts talking about Tammy's health history, talking about anemia and how she was getting sicker. And then he starts asking Mattingly about the Fitbit data. And he said, is it clear that Tammy Daybell was the one wearing it the entire time? Because somebody else could have been wearing it. And Mattingly said that she was actually in an internal contest with Fitbit. And Fitbit, there's a community much like Facebook, and you can do challenges, and that Tammy was part of those challenges. So he's positive that Tammy was the one wearing the Fitbit, that Tammy seemed to be a very honest person and that she was a competitive person. Prior rest, Blake comes back on to redirect. Blake asks if any of Chad Daybell's children came forward voluntarily with any information, and Mattingly said not one of them offered any information. They all had to be asked, and 𝗚𝗂 refused. And then when they were asked, they just said that their mother had been going downhill. Mattingly is released from the stand, but not from the subpoena, as he might be called again. The next witness is Detective Vince 𝗙𝗂𝗏. He has been called to the stand. He was a detective at the time of the case. He was with the Fremont County Sheriff's Office. Now he is with the Madison County Sheriff's Office. We've heard from him once before, and he's back on in a different manner. And before he was testifying because of his expertise on the county jail phone system and the fact he was at the Daybell property the day it was searched for 𝗙𝗍 and JJ's bodies. Now he's back in reference to Tammy Daybell's death. He said that he had talked with Officer Greenlaw about the unattended death, and he was helping Idaho Falls Police with an officer-involved shooting, so he could not go, but he asked Officer Greenlaw to go. He said he did not learn of anything suspicious about Tammy Daybell's death until later, like everybody else did. He said no investigation was opened at the time, but an investigation was later started. He said he became involved in Tammy Daybell's case after it was ruled a homicide in March of 2020. He said, my main focus was Tammy. He said that he was involved with the investigation. He did assist with locating JJ and 𝗙𝗍, but he said that he also looked into the gun or paintball gun being pointed at Tammy earlier before she died. They now play the 911 call for the attempted shooting of Tammy Daybell from October 9th. And after they listen to it, Blake brings up Alex Cox, and 𝗙𝗂𝗀𝗆 tells him what he knew about Alex Cox. And then they said it was referred to as a paintball incident for several times, but then it later came out that it may have been a real gun. And then he goes through everything that would differentiate a real gun from a paintball gun and how they came to that conclusion. And then they talk a little bit more about Alex Cox, referring to some of the evidence that was presented at Lori Vallow's trial. And then the actual testimony for the day is over. 𝗙𝗂𝗀𝗆 is released, but he will be back on the stand today, Thursday, April 25th. And now Boyce and the lawyers are talking about some motions that he wants to get out of the way, as they were on the docket for the following week, as next week will be a short week. They want to rule on as many as they can. The jury is also excused, and there's a short break. And then Rob Wood is bringing up that Kay Woodcock is there to get a victim's impact statement for Charles Vallow when that time comes, and that Ann Cushing, who is Tylee Ryan's aunt, would be those two impact witnesses for Charles and Tylee. There was no objections to that. Then there is a motion by the defense to limit references to Tammy Daybell and the word zombie. And then how a lot of that is hearsay. Wood and Pryor argue back and forth with a lot of legal jargon. And basically, Tammy Daybell and the word zombie, they want that thrown out. That we know that they were saying that she had been possessed by a woman named Viola, but they never actually used the term dark or zombie for Tammy. But they're tying in the zombie with it. According to Pryor, the prosecution is trying to wrap all of that in, that it's all hearsay. And basically, Boyce said he will rule on those motions first thing the next day, which is today, Thursday, April 25th. And that is where the stream ends. And everyone, thank you so much. I'll be back on Friday with what happened today, Thursday, April 25th, in the Chad Daybell case. Thank you. 𝗙𝗂𝗀𝗆.